All right guys, on today's video, we're gonna take a look at how to install these artificial snake skins on the back of a Selfbow. Now, once we get done with this video, I'm gonna give you my thoughts on these things as compared to real snake skins, so stick around. So before we get started into the process, I wanna mention that there are other ways to install these artificial skins onto bows, especially if you're doing a laminated bow or a bow that's already finished. One popular method is to use a contact cement so that you can take the things off if you don't like them on there later on or if you want to change things. We are going to be installing these on this bow permanently, and so we're going to be using Titebond wood glue. If you do want to, if you think that you might want to take them off sometime in the future, contact cement is a great option. All right, so to get this project done, all we've got to have is our artificial snake skin, some good wood glue. This is Titebond 3, it's a waterproof wood glue, and then some sort of sealer. Three Rivers recommends Minwax polyurethane. I don't have any of that, so I'm just going to use the True Oil that I use for sealing all of my bows. Now, the first thing that you want to do is just make sure that the back of the bow is clean, doesn't have any dust, grease, and stuff like that on it. If you've been handling it, you'll get oils from your hands onto the back of the bow, and you just want to make sure that you have all that stuff off. If you want to be very careful, you can take this thing into the shower or just wash it down. Take like a Brillo pad or something like that with some dish detergent and just scrub the back of this bow, and that's going to get all those oils and things off of there. Now, I just recently finished this bow and I scraped all of the remaining early wood from chasing a ring off of this thing, so this is a fairly clean back, but it's also very smooth. And so I'm going to take some 80 grit sandpaper and just go over the back just to kind of scar things up a little bit to give that glue a little bit better place to bite. All right, so obviously that's put some sanding dust on the back, so I'm just gonna clean that off. So putting this stuff on is fairly simple. I'm just gonna spread some wood glue on the back of this thing, but when you do that, you need to put a fair bit of glue on here because this is cloth, and that cloth is going to soak up some of that glue. It's going to soak up a lot of the glue. As you can see, it's a little bit windy out here today. That's all right. Trying to get that pattern laying right down the middle. And this bow has got some snaky grain to it, so this skin's gonna look really good on the side. And so I could take this skin and just lay it straight up and down this thing and kind of go across the pattern. But what I'm gonna do is shift this skin back and forth to follow that snaky grain. It's gonna make it look really cool. When you push this snake skin and pull it down on the bow, you should be able to see that glue kind of oozing up through that cloth. You don't want a bunch of extra glue under there, if you can help it. Try to get, if there's any wrinkles at all, try to get that out of there. Gonna make for a much nicer finish. Now I'm just gonna go ahead, put a coat of glue over the top of this. Again, this is Titebond 3, which is a waterproof glue. It's gonna help to fill up all the pores and give our sealer a good place to sit. We'll try to work this down into the hide, or into the cloth. Excess, just try to wipe any excess off that you've got. Now, when I trim this up, I'm going to trim it just to the back. Some folks like to have that snakeskin wrapped all the way around the sides of the bow. You could do that if you wanted to. You just have to glue the sides and, of course, you know, push the skin around the sides. But I like the way it looks when it's just trimmed right to the back. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do is just take a wet rag with a little bit of warm water and wipe off the excess glue. There we go. So this ought to be dry, at least dry enough to trim this up to the to fit the back of the bow here in a couple hours. So we're just going to let it sit here and come back and trim it later. All right, so I went ahead and just let this dry overnight. The glue is all set up, and now we're ready to trim this to the back of the bow. Now you could do this with a razor knife, but that's not the way I'm gonna do it. And the reason is because on this particular bow, there's not a really defined edge between the back and the side. And what I mean by that is the edges of this bow are kind of rounded off, and so the back kind of rolls off into the belly. Now, if you do have a bow, either a laminated bow or a Selfbow where there is that definite edge between the back and the belly, you can just trim this off with a razor knife and it'll be fine. But because this bow is unfinished, I still have to do all the sanding and everything, I'm just gonna use a rasp just like I would on a rawhide backing or a real snakeskin backing. And if you're interested in any of those videos, I do have YouTube videos on both rawhide and real snakeskin. So I'm gonna go ahead and just clamp this in the vise and use the fine side of my rasp. You can also use a mill file or anything like that. And just real lightly trim that right to the back. So it's just cutting this edge right where the back transitions into the side. All right, so our snake skin is all dry. We've got it trimmed up perfectly to the back of the bow. I've got everything sanded down, and now we're ready to go ahead and finish it. And like I said before, I'm just gonna put True Oil on it. It's the same stuff I use on all my bows. I put 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 coats, depending on how much time I've got. But this stuff is pretty durable, you know. Once it dries and you build up a couple of coats, it'll protect the bow really well. All right, so we'll let that one dry, put another coat on there, and keep repeating that until we've got about 6 or 7 coats on this thing. I'll bring you guys back when that's all done. All right, so these things went on there pretty easy and they actually look pretty good, but there are some pretty obvious differences between the way these look and the way a real snake skin is gonna look. But if you looked at the bow from a little bit of a distance, you probably wouldn't be able to tell that much of a difference. When you hold the bow up close, you can certainly tell that they're not real snake skins, but like I said, you'd have to look at it fairly closely to know that. Now, one big difference that you're gonna notice on this particular bow is the color of these skins is a little bit off compared to a real copperhead skin. The reason for that is I put these skins on the back of a very new, freshly built, vibrant yellow Osage Selfbow, and some of that yellow is kind of showing through here, and so it's making the skins look light colored. Now I think over time as the wood starts to darken, I think that's gonna look a lot better as this wood starts to get darker. If I were to do this again, I think what I would do is follow the recommendations of someone that posted on my Patreon site, and I apologize, I can't remember who this was, but they had recommended taking a black Sharpie and just coloring the back of the bow, which will darken down the back and cause that yellow to not show through there. And so I think if you did that, you're gonna end up with a much better looking finish on this thing. So I think overall they look pretty doggone good, and considering that these are gonna be a lot less expensive than real snake skins, I think it's gonna be a good option for dressing up the back of some of these Selfbows that you guys are making. So that's gonna wrap up this video. Again, if you have never checked out the Patreon site, I encourage you to go over there and do that. There's a ton of great videos. I think I have like 27, maybe 28, and counting exclusive Patreon only bow building videos that are extremely detailed over there. So go over there, check that out, and we'll see you guys next time.